And Jason told me a few months ago that he and Laura were going to a workshop in the United States that had something really important to give to Auroville. I have to say that I was very skeptical. But when they came back and gave their first presentation on restorative circles as a way of dealing with conflict, I was quite impressed. And the thing that impressed me the most, I think, was the fact that the community is included. It's not just the person who has acted and the person who has received the act, which we may call the victim and the perpetrators sometimes, but in restorative circles we don't use those terms. The community is also involved. So, at that time, I was watching on the AV net the Auroville situation, and I saw that so many different groups were having an opinion on this and dealing with this and seeming, to my opinion, to add confusion to the situation. And I thought, wow, if only they would try something. Of course, we didn't know about restorative circles, but only if we could do something like restorative circles, because it involves having everybody in the room together. All of the working groups, all of the support group, all of the friends, even the friends from the village, everybody is there together and makes a plan together about what to do next. So this was the part that touched me the most. So since that time, a group of us have been meeting once a week and practicing this skill, how to lead a restorative circle, and we are hoping that more people will be interested in this practice and be used in Auroville eventually.
In the work that Jason and I have been doing for the last 4 years, the name Dominic Barter and restorative circles had come up several times from many of our connections around the world. And so when it actually became possible to go to a training of his in the US in October, I jumped with joy. And I'm really, really glad that I went, or more than glad. Yeah, for me it was a missing link, or a real deepening of the work that I am doing with communication and with dealing with conflict. And one of the things that touched me so much about Dominic is he's actually a British man, and he was in Brazil. Followed a woman there, I think. And he saw all of this injustice, all of this stuff happening on the street that he was very uncomfortable with the slums and racism and violence and exclusion, inclusion, all this kind of stuff. And many of the newfound friends that he had warned him and said, "Don't go there, Dominic. You're an outsider. You're going to be killed." And he was really scared, and he didn't go. He tried a couple of times, and then he would back off, and then he actually went back to England. And after he was back in England for a while, he said, "No, I cannot live with myself. I'm not really walking my talk, I'm just a chicken." And he went back to Brazil. And little by little entered the slums, and he went, the first day he would just go on the outside and actually meet the little kids who are the guards on the outside. And then a couple of days later, when the little kids trusted him, he would meet the bigger kids who actually had guns and dealing drugs, and he would go slowly, slowly deeper in. And just hearing the story, I was really, really, moved, and seeing how he was really walking his talk and risking his life. And what I enjoy as well is that this process, he didn't have this process pre-designed. He designed it with people in the slums. So I'm very hopeful for this, and Jason and I have been deepening since. We're still beginners. It's something that I'm very, very excited about.
So my motivation for standing here today and talking with all of you is much more practical. I'm trying to make my life simpler. Somebody just called a restorative circle recently, and 40 Aurovillians are invited to participate. And I imagine having 40 phone calls to say what I'm going to say today. This is much simpler. So I thought, why not have a presentation that would include a bunch of people who could spread the word about what's really happening, so my phone calls are shorter. So that's the practical nature of this. I think for me there's 3 central questions that I want to touch on today. And maybe the first question that matters to me, and I hope matters to you, is why? Why restorative circles? What is it about restorative circles that all of you are here for? What's interesting about this? So instead of giving you my perspective, I'd actually like you to hear it from Dominic Barter himself. So we have a couple video clips that he's made available, and I'd like to play a few of these so that you can get a sense of what this work is, how it originated, and who the man who really helped create this work is. And then I'd like to open it up for questions. I could offer lots of information. I've been really excited about this and putting a lot of time into it for many months. But instead of just burying you in information, I'd like to hear from you what's important. One of the other questions that I think is sort of central to this is what? What is restorative circles? What does the process look like? And the final question, which I think seems really fundamental to me, is how? How do we go about it? You know, we're here, we're in Auroville. Many of you don't know you're part of a restorative system. It's a deeply kept secret for the last 6 months. But it exists. You can use it. So I'd like to touch on that also. So I hope you have a bit more understanding of why. What it is, what role Restorative Circles wants to play. Like Dominic, I'm exploring how to create fight rooms. So, I'd like to open it up to questions.
Jason, it's not really a question, but could you say more about how it's spread throughout Brazil? How he actually started small and it's really spreading.
Okay. I'm actually very new to the process and practice of restorative circles. It's only been since October of last year. And I worked with Dominic for 4 days in Atlanta, Georgia, together with Laura. So we're both developing our own understanding of the significance of different parts of the process and the reasons for different parts of the process. So I hope Laura will stop me at any time if she wants to add her understanding, because we're developing this as we go along.
But I do want to add that it's more just than those 4 days, the whole work that we've been doing for the last 4 years. Adds to.
Okay, so the work originally started in the favelas in Rio de Janeiro, in the shanty towns. Dominic was invited in to people's houses more and more. He got involved with different organizations working in the favelas without an ulterior motive, without an agenda of wanting to accomplish something. And he noticed that more and more people wanted to talk about their conflicts. People wanted to share what was going on in their life, where they felt themselves in a state of victimhood, where the power to affect their world was out of their reach. And this process of restorative circles evolved out of that over time. And it began being used in these favelas, in these shanty towns. I think there's over 2,500 favelas in Rio de Janeiro. It began to spread because it was working as a parallel justice system in the favelas. In many of these places, actually, there is no criminal justice system available. The only justice system you have is to talk to the guy down the street with the AK-47 and ask him to intimidate the person who did something that you don't like.
Just can you explain why there's
In many of these places, this is not true anymore. The situation in Rio has changed very much. Some of the favelas have been taken back over by the police. But for a long time, drug gangs run the favelas. So it's 14-year-olds with AK-47s that are the law, that are the government. And so it developed in these places where there really was no other alternative. The police would not come in. If there was something that happened, there were no alternatives. And so this developed in that situation. And then it began to spread. Instead of offering something that in places where it wasn't available, it moved into the criminal justice system as well. He began working with judges, he began working with police, and it began to be offered as part of the existing justice system, in the criminal justice system. So if someone was arrested by the police, they were given an offer of also, in parallel, having a restorative process that they could do. So while they were awaiting trial or while they were awaiting sentencing, they could also have a restorative circle to involve all of the people. It has spread over many states in Brazil. It has different levels of involvement in the official government in different states. In the southernmost state of Brazil, I don't remember the name, it's officially part of the public school system. So restorative circles are available to all public school students. The circles themselves are facilitated by the students. If something happens and they want to call a circle, it can involve their teachers, their principal, their parents, whatever community member they feel needs to be there, whatever community member they feel is affected in this process. And in those school systems, what they see is the only other alternative was to involve the police. So in one of these school systems, in the space of 1 year since they began using restorative circles, the number of incidents that were handled by police has dropped by 90%. Because like he said, it's not that the incidents of violence decrease immediately. It's that the community now has an ability to handle what happens. They trust they have the ability to handle what happens. They don't need to involve anyone else. And after that, with that trust, you see a diminishing in the amount of issues, conflicts, and violence. So that's, I hope it gives you a sense of how it's being used in Brazil. And about 3 years ago, Dominic began traveling around the world to Europe and North America and giving trainings so that he could begin to share what he does and how he does it, so it can be used in other contexts. It's still very, very new in North America and in Europe, and I don't have much information about what's going on there.
Dominic is saying that it's all right to have conflicts, right? He's not there to solve the conflicts, he's there to welcome the conflicts. That already means that one should not have the belief that conflicts are not good to be solved. And I'm not sure that there are no moral or spiritual beliefs that could act against that, like saying conflicts are not good, which is a very good way to avoid dealing with them. So, as a community, I'm not fully sure that we are already accepting the only fact that conflicts have to be accepted, and that's not bad, of course.
Right.
This is what I want to
Yeah, thank you for that. So if I could just, since the microphone can't hear you, I'm just going to try to summarize what I heard you say. So it seems that the central point is this idea that many of us grew up with this experience that conflicts are bad, that conflicts should be avoided, that conflicts are caused by mean people, and they should be punished, and then everything will be good. But what Dominic is suggesting seems to be radically different than that. Am I understanding?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, Mohan. Pauline, I saw you had your hand up for a long time.
Yeah, because I still have a feeling because I'm listening to Air. I heard what he said, which is nice, that we need to have fighting rules, idea that conflict is an opportunity for growth, which is also something I've doing for 30 years. I would like to know how they work. Very practical. What is a restorative circle? Are we sitting with 20 people in a circle and people say what they want to say, or how does it work? At least in a sense of what I'm doing.
Yeah, very good question. Okay, so what I'm hearing is that it's all very good to talk about this at the theoretical level, but it really needs some substance to understand actually what's going to change it. Because I guess we all have an experience of conflict as really not getting us anywhere, as really not leading to any kind of
This is not what I'm asking. I'm just asking you, Jason, very simple. How does a circle work?
Okay.
What is a restorative circle? When I say how does it look?
Yeah.
Are we sitting together? What is the form? What do we talk about? How do we
So just the practical
This is
side.
a very practical thing.
Yeah.
That gives me an idea of what I'm talking
Yeah.
about.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, just to be clear, what I've been demonstrating is one of the practical sides of the circle. In the circle, one of the things that as a facilitator I may ask people to do is to let the other people know what they heard them say. So I reflected back what I thought I heard you say, but I didn't hear you.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
And so now I got the chance to actually hear what you meant. Okay. And so one of the fundamental parts of being in a restorative circle is that people get a chance to be heard, not just for the words that they're using, but for the meaning they want to register. I don't know if any of you have had this experience, but have you ever had a 20-minute conversation with somebody and felt like they didn't hear you? They didn't understand? All right, so I'm in a room of people that have, okay. And I'm imagining that that's a frustrating experience. So the circle is set up in a way to allow people to express themselves for what needs to be expressed and to get the feedback of how effectively they express themselves. Because when they get to hear back what the person in the room they're talking to, when they get to hear back what this other person heard me say, I learn pretty quickly whether or not I'm being able to let other people know what really matters to me.
Yeah, that's true, but I still don't get it. I still like before you.
So I just wanted to express that this is one of the fundamental parts of being in this type of circle. Okay? So,
It's coming, Pauline.
so this is just a diagram of the structure of the process. The structure of the process involves at least 3 circles. A number of circles called pre-circles, where we get to meet with people and find out what happened. This is a facilitator like myself or anyone else who's practicing to be a facilitator is going to be contacted by someone who would like to bring an issue to a restorative circle. So, for example, Pauline, you may know that I'm a facilitator of restorative circles, and you may give me a call. You may tell me, there's something that's happened and I want to bring it to a restorative circle. So, I say, fine, let's meet for 15 minutes at La Terrasse, and we'll talk about it. And I'll find out 3 things. I'll find out what happened, I'll find out what it meant to you, and I'll find out who needs to be there. Okay? So from your perspective, who's involved? At that point, I'll have a list of people. And then I'll begin to contact them. And I'll let them know, hi, you've been invited to a restorative circle. If you'd like, I'd like to sit down with you for 15 minutes and find out from your point of view, what happened? What was the meaning for you? And who do you think needs to be there? Who else needs to be there? This is the involvement of the community. We only get to find out who is affected when we actually ask the community to participate in a circle. They let us know very quickly who they think is affected. Okay? So when I've had all of these circles, thank you. So one of the first parts of this process is, say, Pauline, if you contact me and you'd like to initiate a restorative circle, at the end of this 15-minute talk, when I find out who needs to be there, I'm going to ask you one more very important question. And that is, do you want to go ahead? This process is a voluntary process. We live in a community that has no police system, no judges, no court system. We have no one who can enforce these types of situations. It has to be a voluntary process. People have to believe that there's actually something in it for them. There's a reason for them to participate. They will leave the circle with a benefit that they didn't have before coming to the circle. If they think that, they'll want to come to the circle. If they don't think that, they won't be interested. So when I begin to contact the people that you've given me, that list of people, the very first thing I'm going to ask them is, hi, would you like me to talk to you? You've been invited to be part of a restorative circle. Would you like to know more about it? Consent, informed consent, is one of the core parts of this process. People have to understand that they have choice, that they're not obliged to be part of this. They're there because they want to be there. And at the end, after I've gone through the 15-minute pre-circle with them, again I'll ask them the question, okay, now I understand. Do you still want to go ahead? So this is one of the very important points. And I'll ask them also who needs to be there, who else needs to be there. And once I've done contacting all of the people, and I've found who all wants to be there, I'll set up a date for the circle. Then we'll all get together, and we'll have a chance to express ourselves and be heard for the meaning it has for us. We'll sit down together, and one of the very important parts is, as a facilitator, I'll be present in the circle. But as a facilitator, unlike a mediator, I have no more power than anybody else in the circle. This is a chance to experience shared power and shared responsibility. I'm simply a member of the community who's willing to be present to assist in the process because I have a little experience. That's all. And the reason that when I talked to Pauline in the first place, and I agreed to be part of this, I agreed to facilitate it, was because I was moved by the issue. It mattered to me. I cared about it. If I would hear an issue and I would say, I think, this doesn't interest me, I would recommend that you talk to one of the other facilitators. Because I want it to matter to me.
The facilitator is inherently a community member. Yeah? He or she is not somebody in power who's got some indifference to the situation. He or she has some ability to hear meaning and maybe to not get carried away in that moment. Yeah, but if I choose to be a facilitator, it means that I am impacted by this, and I do want to see more harmony than there is now.
In my experience in Auroville, our circles have taken between 2 and 3 hours.
Amongst friends.
And the feedback that I've gotten from North America is their circles take 3 hours or longer. I have very little information to base this on. There have been only a limited number of circles in Auroville, but it seems that this is culturally dependent. So, during that time, in the circle, what we find is 3 phases happen. The first phase, we start to look at the question, how are we right now? What happened, and how are we about what happened? We want to talk about the consequences for us. We want to let people know what's going on for us right now. At some point in time, it seems to shift. Somebody begins to ask the question, but why? Why did you do that? Why did you say that? Why didn't you talk to me? And then we begin looking at a very different question. We begin to look at the question, what were we trying to accomplish when we did what we did? What were the beautiful needs that we were reaching out for? What was the thing that we really wanted that we maybe didn't get? And we look at that question for everyone. What was everyone wanting in the situation? And finally, the circle ends when we get to an action plan. It's a mutually agreed upon set of actions. Okay, and this winds up being one of the most important parts for the community to participate in. If somebody says, usually people offer something to the group, to one person in the group or to the whole group, or somebody requests something of an individual or individuals. And if somebody starts to offer something, well, I'm going to make this email group for restorative circles in Auroville, then somebody might actually step up and say, hang on, Jason, we know you. We know you have the best of intentions, but you don't often follow through with what you say. The community, it's in the community's best interest to see that people are protected. It's in the community's best interest to see that actions are put down that they think are going to lead to the desired outcome. They're not going to let people do things that they don't think they're going to do, and that actually aren't going to lead to the outcome that they want. So once we have an action plan, and each of these actions has a timeline on it, a time limit, so we know when it should be completed by, as a facilitator, I will set up one final circle, post circle. We'll meet again to look at the question, how did the actions lead to the desired outcome? Did they succeed? Did they not succeed? And do we need to do anything more? Does that give you a sense of the structure and the thing?
So there can be several post circles, not just one.
I've heard that there have been occasions when people have had several post circles. So that there were more actions that were desired, and eventually the group kept meeting over and over and over and over again because they enjoyed it, because it got stuff done.
I want to add something just to that. I don't know necessarily that they enjoyed it, and I've lost my point. Yeah, right. Now I got it back. Thank you. So the point is not to fix conflict, right? When we have this intention of we got to fix it, we usually are running really fast and not actually seeing what's going to be restorative, what's actually going to be constructive to us having a bit more harmony, to us being willing to accept other people's existence in our community a little bit more. So we might have several post circles because several action plans might keep on coming up. So when we come back a month from now, we might see, oh wow, that did make a difference, but there's still some work to do with these people, yeah, with my neighbors that I don't like. So then we might offer something else as an action plan. The people, not me necessarily as a facilitator, but the people in the circle. So you keep on having post circles until there are no more action plans that come up, until there are no more requests that participants are making, members are making, or offers that they're making. And then a point that I wanted to share earlier about self-responsibility.
The question of why.
Why did you do it? I want to spend some time on this because for me it really, really shifts the way we look at conflict and the way we look at actions that we don't like. So I think normally in the justice system, or in our own thinking about other people's behavior, we're very quick to go to right and wrong, good and bad. And it's only my particular judgment in this case, right? So I can take a situation that's true. On Monday morning, one of my ammas, her house was burned down in the village. And I can easily jump to the conclusion, and many people could easily jump to the conclusion that that's bad. And if we were to find the person who did it, then he or she should be punished. And this question of self-responsibility that comes up in restorative circles focuses on a totally different way of looking at it. So instead of saying that this person who lit the house on fire is bad and should be punished, we try to understand why. What was the deeper thing that this person was trying to accomplish? That burning the house is superficial and he or she in the moment didn't have better strategies, yeah? He or she had limited thinking, and I wish he or she wouldn't have chosen that strategy. But now that it's done and over, we want to look at why, what deeper down was going on. So maybe it was something like this man was wanting, or this woman actually jumped to the conclusion, was wanting equality, or wanting to be seen, or wanting to be heard. Yeah, for some pain that he or she is carrying from before. So that's the question of self-responsibility. So it's not quickly jumping to it's right and wrong and you shouldn't have done that, and so now you're going to somehow correct your ways, which is not doable anyway. The house is gone. Yeah, but we can start to understand what's happening deeper down. And that's where we're all connected as human beings. I also want equality. So I can understand that this person wanted equality, even if I didn't like the particular strategy she chose. Renu, your hand has been up for a while.
I just wanted to know what happens if you identify somebody and that somebody doesn't want to come to the circle.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just make sure I've understood your question and also for the radio. So you're wondering if someone is called to a circle, so let's say Jason has spoken to Pauline and Pauline names you and Jason phones you up and you say, no, I'm not interested. So this can absolutely happen. And maybe in this particular case, yeah, Renu thinks it's a waste of time or she's not yet believing that this is actually going to give her anything. It's going to be of any benefit or any benefit to the community. And she might just say no. So there is a possibility of having a substitute, an experienced facilitator could be a substitute for Renu. Now this is not role-playing, yeah? Let's say I was the substitute. Jason would ask me if I'm willing to substitute Renu. I would come just imagining that I have said or done whatever Renu has said or done. And that's all. And then I'm just Laura. Yeah? Because the process can still have healing or can still have power to restore the situation even if Renu is not present. And what I find especially beautiful is that when we come to the action plan, the whole community gives feedback as to whether the action plan is mutually beneficial. So let's say X says, I'm going to ask Renu to leave Auroville. And then Y says, I'm not okay with that. Yeah, so anything that comes up in the action plan is for everybody's benefit. So then me being there, if I'm not Renu, it's okay. Because when the action plans come up, the things that impact Renu, everyone is going to care whether those are really beneficial for Renu or not. And she will be invited to the co-circle and can make a choice again. In Auroville, we haven't yet, in the existing circles that we've had, we haven't yet had representatives. The recommendation is that very experienced facilitators only are representatives. And then this is just so that you don't jump into role play or this kind of stuff. Do you want to add something to that?
Yeah. The purpose of the substitution is really to make sure that the community has the power to initiate a process to get the desired outcome that they want, and that no one person has veto power over the process. So the process will continue even if someone doesn't want it to go on. We had a circle where there was someone who was invited to the circle. They didn't want to come, and they didn't want the circle to take place. They were very upset that there was a circle taking place about the action that they did, and they knew it would go ahead even without them. And after talking with them for a while, we expressed, people will talk about you, and you can't stop them from talking about you, even if it happens at Solar Kitchen, even if it happens at Portus. What we're offering you is a chance to be present.
So that's the intent.
And to hear it, and to make sure that you're part of the action plan, so that you can ensure that you get something out of this process. And that eventually the person decided to come and we went ahead.
And it was a great circle.
Does that help? Now there were a lot of hands up from before. I just want to make sure. Audrey, you had your hand up for some time, yeah?
Have you thought of how some conflicts are between, say, me and Lavenir? Well, so you go to Lavenir, and it would depend, would it not, on who came to represent Lavenir and how that circle would go.
Right. So just let me make sure I understand the question. Sometimes we may have a conflict that seems to be between an individual and a group or an organization. And how do we invite people from that group? Is that the question, Audrey?
Yeah.
And it seems that somehow the outcome may be dependent upon which members of the group who come. Yeah. It's a very good question. The information that I have is that it is always a personal process, meaning people are invited to circles, not groups. So if you want a particular individual to be present, you invite that person to be part of the circle. And it could even be that you would invite them in their capacity as being a Lavinier. But as I understand it, people are invited to circles, not groups.
What if you didn't know?
So what he would
The
do
decision.
specifically, if you said, I want Lavinia to come, I would say, so Audrey, who on Lavinia would you like to come?
But what if I did not know who made the decision or who was, because some people are for decisions, some people are against them, and I guess it's 3 to 1.
Yeah, so again, me as a facilitator, I would try to talk through that with you and see really who do you want. And you might say, everybody on Lavinia. And then I might have a pre-circle with everybody on Lavinia, at least the ones who want to come. And then who shows up, shows up.
The Lavinier people are just
Yeah,
as
we're running
scared.
away. I guess they're not coming to the circle, but we're going to talk about that. But don't worry, our decisions will be mutually beneficial. Yvonne, also you had your hand up. No, you're not Yvonne. Aren't you? Yes. Elaine.
Sorry. I wasn't, when I had my hand up, I wasn't making the difference between NBC and this process, other than community. Because NBC, you can also have a facilitator, and you identify, you talk about what it is that is upsetting you, the person reflects back what they think they hear, and you express what your wants and desires are. What is different with this?
So, okay, so you're curious about what the difference between NVC is and restorative circles?
Correct.
And I'm hearing that for you, NVC, nonviolent communication, you understand that there is a sort of reflection that I share myself and the person reflects what they hear. And you're seeing that in restorative circles, the community is involved.
Yes.
Is that right? So I would like to clarify, are you talking about nonviolent communication mediation?
Perhaps.
Okay. Because nonviolent communication, it's a consciousness or a path that you can live without necessarily being in conflict or without necessarily speaking to another person. But if we talk about nonviolent communication mediation, the consciousnesses are both based on nonviolence. Yeah, so they come from the same philosophy. Dominic is definitely very moved by the work of Marshall Rosenberg and incorporates it. But he wanted to be able to reach a much larger audience, and he wanted to make a process that anybody could use, where swear words were allowed, for example, right? He says where marginalized people are included and where they have the power to facilitate circles. And being a nonviolent communication mediator, or just a normal mediator, still means that I have some sort of role, some sort of power, that I somehow have training and I've agreed that I'm going to help this process, and I might interrupt and yeah, and I might be perceived as being an outside expert and that we should come somewhere. And so restorative circles, it's much more, like you say, of a community practice where the facilitator, yes, I have some experience and therefore I'm offering my experience as support, but I'm moved by this subject. And as a community, it's shared power. Yeah, the restorative circle includes shared power. So I don't necessarily, there are some questions that I have, guiding questions, but I don't necessarily, I'm not the only person talking, or I'm not the only person running the show. Anybody can jump in at any point and say, you know, why did you do that? Or, no, I didn't get you. What did you say? Yeah. The other difference is that often mediation is between only two parties or two groups, but there's an A and a B. Whereas in restorative circles there isn't. There are community members and there are actors and there are receivers. Yes.
For me, I see time going, and I think I'm more a visual person than a listening person. And I would like to know if we're going to see a practice or simulation of a practice group. And I have lots of questions about how the circle is happening, which would be answered for the bit I see. And we can ask more questions.
So that I understand your question, Sophie, you are a visual person and you would really enjoy to see a practice demonstrated here. From my understanding, that was not in the plan. One reason for that actually is that restorative circles do not have observers. If you are an observer, you're automatically a community member. Yeah? We do have weekly practice groups, and people are welcome to join the practice group or to come and observe the practice group, and we'll give you information after as to how to do that, to have a visual, direct experience of what was happening. 7?
Okay. Thank you,
Yes.
Okay. So just now I was about to tell the other way around, the curious case of Benjamin Button. So I mean, instead of Reno being the aggrieved party, and the other community wanted to call Reno, and Reno did not come. Now let us put it the other way. So there is one person here who wants the community to come because I am grieved, and the community doesn't come. So then, as a solution, you said you can have little exploratory groups, okay, sample of doing that. So in that way, I can tell this case of the curious case of the Benjamin Button could be taken for the next session, because I have something on Saturday 16th. I will call for the community of Auroville that I want to speak to you. I put in the message. So it's possible nobody is going to turn up because they think I'm crazy. Many people may think.
So 7, now let me see if I'm understanding you. Are you curious if you were calling a circle and you have named several community members to attend, and let's say I as a facilitator have pre-circles with those community members, or even if they don't want to pre-circle with me, and you are wondering what happens, can the circle still proceed?
What to do? Because let me elaborate this thing. Here you said the problem is that is how people are affected is. In the other way, in the normal life, you said something about how the other could be affected. But here, we are a collective community, and we are all like stars are being held in balance by every in the whole system. We are all here being balanced by everybody. So the pain that I undergo here for being a voluntary person of living in Auroville for the ideals of Auroville, that pain which the collective never understands me is going to attack them again. So it means the collective is going to suffer. So I want to tell the community, please listen to me, otherwise you are suffering. And they don't listen to me.
So 7, is it that you really want a space where you can express yourself and be heard?
Yes.
So
Because
I would, can I
the
answer your
context
question?
is, listen, if you don't listen, you are doing a big karma. And I'm also part of the collectivity.
So I'd love to answer your question, 7, how this can work or not work in restorative circles. So in restorative circles, if I am the facilitator, I don't have any power to enforce the community members that you have named to come. I would hope for your benefit that some do come so that you can be heard and that you can also hear them. But I cannot enforce it. Now a community, a circle, I don't know what balance of representatives we can have and then real people, but I don't think I would feel comfortable personally holding a circle with you and representatives instead of community members. I might take 2 representatives, but not more. The rest I would want the actual... Let me finish. I would like to finish. So if more community members didn't come, I would say 7, I'm not comfortable facilitating this circle. And in that sense, in that role, I don't have power to make the circle happen. I'm only a willing servitor in this situation. And there the community is speaking.
Okay, you told your limitation that you cannot impose yourself. But here is the Auroville, the experimental of living together. If the collectivity doesn't want to listen to me, wherein I am part of you, then the totality is going to suffer. Because the suffering of one person here is collectivity.
So 7, I'm hearing for you that it's very painful and you really want to experience a sense of community.
Yes.
Living community.
Yes.
Dominique? Yes.
this process seems to me to be involving a lot the problem of sincerity. So how far in this process, which was great, actually, very fascinating, how far can you be sure that the people who express themselves in the circles are actually sincere and actually want sincerely to come to solving the so-called conflict, and knowing that every human being has also life to oneself. So how can you deal with that?
Sure.
I can tell it in public, so.
So let me just make sure I'm understanding, so we can record it. It seems that the question about sincerity or honesty is important. What will we do in a circle to guarantee that there is that sincerity and that honesty? Did I understand you? I also heard you say something about maybe it was about the intention that people were coming, that people had the intention of wanting to solve the conflict. And I just wanted to be careful about that because, again, I don't believe that people are coming with the intention of solving the conflict. I think they have many different intentions, and I won't find out until they actually sit down and begin to tell me. Oftentimes, like 7, it's they really want to be heard and they really want to be understood. They're sick and tired of hearing from their neighbors that they're bad for the actions that they take and the things that they try to do. And they want to actually be seen for the real reasons behind what they do and what they say. And so I just want to bring that out because that may not be clear.
And as well, Dominique, in the circle, you could say, Raquel, I'm not trusting you. That sounds like bogus. Or you've been saying that for years. And then your meaning will be heard. So everybody is empowered in the circle to share whatever is coming up. And through the process and through my experience with it, I trust that what needs to come up comes up. Even if it looks off topic or it does come up.
So restoration is not done.
What is
Restoration is not done.
I'm having a little difficulty hearing you, 7. Could you restoration is?
So if it is so, the kind of ending she gave, it means restorative process is not done.
So you're wondering what is restored?
Yes.
Yeah.
So see, a conflict is an entanglement. So a restorative process has to either cut off the entanglement or take out the entanglement. Otherwise, what is restoration?
So I hear you have the question about when we say restorative circles, what are we restoring?
Yeah.
Thank you. I'd like to answer that, but I'd like to finish answering the comment. I said something a little bit earlier about, as a facilitator, I have no more power than any other community member sitting in the circle. I have an experience with the process, and I have a willingness in the process. And I have a list of questions that I may ask occasionally. Things like, what did you hear Dominic say? And looking at Dominic, was that it, Dominic? Were you heard the way you wanted to be heard? And like Laura said, I hope that if there's someone in the circle who's sitting there with something inside of them that says, I'd like to trust this, but I don't. I think that's very important information. I think it's very important information if nothing is said, and there's silence around the group. And I think it's very important information if somebody says, bullshit.
You have to dare say so. Sometimes starting to speak and speaking sincerely is a risk. So how far will you find such an atmosphere of trust and confidence so as to be able to say, no, I don't trust you, or this is not true, or I don't believe you.
So if I'm understanding that it's a question of really pointing out how vulnerable it can be to reveal what's really going on inside, what we're really thinking and what we're really feeling. Thank you. what seems to me to be really important is an issue, again, that is one of the underlying principles of restorative circles. One of the things that I've heard Dominic say a few times is that it would be irresponsible of us to believe that it is individual action or individual responsibility that should be held responsible for any situation. And yet it is equally irresponsible to believe that it's the system's fault. It's society's fault. Yet both of these are true. That the actions took place within a systemic context. Auroville has existed for 40 years. There has been a series of incidents and conflicts in history in Auroville that leads to the actions of today. People would not be taking the actions of today if there hadn't been 40 years of history. So to ignore that history would be irresponsible. Yet to pretend that as individuals we hold no responsibility is equally irresponsible. But that systemic context has to be discovered. When we sit down in a circle, we have to recognize, we have to learn to begin to see and to recognize this is the consequences of 40 years of history in the community. And when everybody is sitting there with their hands folded and they're not saying anything, what it's saying is there is not trust right now in this room. And that's part of the systemic context that needs to be uncovered. We need to hear it. Does that begin to answer your question? B.
As you said, Auroville has 40 years or 43 years of history.
Thank you.
And
for some people, facts are very important. They need to make that distinction. I know that B is one of them, so I could trust that you'll always get me straight.
Yes. But the pain level is very high in Auroville. As you see, Seven is a perfect example. He has demonstrated that the pain that he feels is never heard by the community. And while this is a wonderful system that I fully support, it will not deal necessarily with Seven's pain.
Right. So let me just make sure. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So how deep can this restorative circle process be for Auroville because of its history and because of the fact that we have people here from so many different cultures, so many different educational backgrounds? Will it work, to deal with some of the really deep issues that we are the world is dealing with, and naturally then we're dealing with
Can I tell one example?
I think I've got enough clarity with B. I just want to check in with B that I do have that clarity. If I don't, then maybe I'll come to you soon. So B, what I'm hearing is there is a history in Auroville. And some of that history is related to pain about not being heard and not being understood. And it's not clear to you that this process is going to be able to help individuals who are experiencing that pain, or like Dominic was saying, that state of victimhood, where the ability to affect their well-being is out of their reach. And so you're wondering to what extent this process could be used to really begin to handle the really thorny issues that seem to be present in the community. And to what extent could they even begin to restore what was lost? Am I understanding?
Yes, and I just added that last part because this has a very Western bias. It's a very
you added a piece about can we handle this much diversity?
Yes. Can
we handle this number of languages? This number of belief systems? Yeah. I guess I have a lot of ways of answering the question. I guess the one that is the shortest and the one that seems the most honest is I really hope so. That's why I'm standing here today.
And yet, it would be foolish to promise yes. You don't know. You can only explore. I personally very much trust this process. And I trust Dominic's history, 13 years? 17 years in the favelas. I think the favelas are way more dangerous than Auroville and much more pain.
That's not sure.
Okay, that's again my interpretation. Maybe not. Who knows? And I'm willing to try. I'm willing to put it to the test. Do you have a question, Anandi, or feedback?
About this, because I know what the favela is now from Argentina. And I tell you frankly, if this works in the favela, should have to work in Argentina. You have to try. On the other hand, something very interesting, 3 hours in USA, 3 hours here. In South America it's like that, because they don't use too much the mind. Possibly one of our problems is going to be the mind. In the favela, they understand they go. You know, it's like, or they kill you or they love you. But I think that we could try. It's very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. So I'm hearing you have some hope and trust.
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Vinodini.
In my observation, this looks pretty much like the rough pattern of what AB Council has been practicing so far, maybe unconsciously, with this kind of focus maybe is missing. Right? Roughly speaking, this is what they are doing. Somehow observed once or twice, because they are the ones involved in the conflict area more within Council. My original question is a bit of blunt combination of what Dominic asked and what Will asked. We have a diversity, and we have a specific issue about being, being open, let's say. Let's put it in that way. How does the circle conduce that atmosphere? Why the concept is not able to make it up? What in the restorative circle do?
So if I'm understanding you, Vinodini, in your experience, the council has been using a process similar to this, and you're curious why what you're calling openness hasn't come up, or transparency hasn't come up in the issues that the council has been trying to deal with.
Rather than why, it's like if I could not even be open in that level, what would make me open up in this? See, here you say there is no power, there is no nothing. You are demanding raw sincerity, raw honesty. At least there is some end that would come. Like at one point, council might end up saying, no, we do this, we have decided like this, things like that. At least you have a fake decision somewhere possible, that here it's not like that. You just have to, go in a different sense here.
So you're wondering what it is in the restorative circle process that really can hold a framework, that can create a framework that holds honesty.
Yes.
That can hold that delicacy.
More delicacy.
So first of all, I have not been involved in any of the council conflicts, so I can't judge how they, went right or went wrong. Yeah? I guess in my work for the last 4 years, I really trust that this process and this consciousness has the ability to hold that delicate space and to pull that delicate space out. I can only speak from my experience in it. So, and a lot of it hasn't been in Auroville. Yeah, I've spent a lot of my time in the last year actually in different places in India. I know it works. When I'm personally involved, I know it works.
We had something really interesting happen in the practice group. We were practicing as facilitators to learn how to just be part of this process and how to help other people have circles. We were having our own circles, so we were eating our own dog food. The group had a moment of really deep understanding, one of those aha moments. I played an audio tape that was from the Atlanta training. It was Dominic talking about this idea that we have, that we want to reflect back what it is that we've heard. And what Dominic discovered is that there's a cultural understanding about what that means. In Brazil, he uses the phrase, I don't know what it is in Portuguese, but when he translated the Portuguese into English, it was, what did you hear the other person say? And what he was discovering in North America during our training was, if you say that phrase, it's dinner time, it's not if you use that phrase in North America, what people will answer is they will summarize, they will paraphrase, they will repeat the words that they've heard the other person say. And that isn't what happens in Brazil. It never happened. And so he was in the middle of the training and he went, something really interesting is happening. I'm finally beginning to understand why people have difficulty with this question. And there's a huge significance about it. He calls it parrot phrasing. That in his experience, if we simply repeat back the words that we've heard the other person use, the other person doesn't have any sense they've been understood. They don't have any sense that what really matters to them has been recognized by the other people in the room. This is the fundamental crux of the process. That in the beginning of the process, we're literally standing on opposite ends of the room from each other. And as we begin to listen to each other, not for the words that we use, but for the meaning we want to register, we begin to reconnect with the reasons we're here in the first place. We get down to why everybody came to Auroville. We came here for the same reasons. We forget it a lot of the time because we don't like how we see people talk. We don't like how we see people act. And so we can very easily forget, hey wait, they care about what I care about. As we begin to deepen this level of understanding and reconnect with the shared humanity that we all have, there stops being this awful distance between the two of us. At that point, we begin to have this much more willingness to coexist in the same community again. And that is the purpose of a restorative circle.
Then just in continuation of your question, I don't think I would be able to facilitate the way I facilitate without my 4 years of living nonviolence and taking it on as a very serious practice. So I actually feel uncomfortable that the council would actually come in at the end and if nothing happened would make a decision. For me, that totally goes against my integrity. And although yes, I say I have no power in the circle, I mean I have no power to impose my opinion or to impose what I think is the right decision on the members of the community, of the restorative circle. But yes, I am coming with my consciousness and I am coming with my goodwill to support this process. And I will, say, my ideas and my opinions. I will share my honesty if I notice something that other people maybe are not talking about. Or I might notice a look, and I might say, Raquel, what did you see? Yeah, what do you experience? What do you think Vinodini is expressing? And he might go, I don't know. And then I might choose to reflect it. And that already deepens the process. And vulnerability and honesty and transparency starts to come.
Could I say just one more thing? The last bit that really excited me about your question was about this idea that at least if we take an issue to the council, there'll be some, fake decision. I think those were the words that I heard you use. What I want to offer the participants of a restorative circle is a real offer of support from their community so they can trust that the community cares and the community wants them to have what they want for themselves.
That's exactly my question. I can't trust counselors because I have chosen to do this job somewhere. How am I going to counsel this to you?
So I just take a second to step back. How can you, if you can't trust the council, then how could you trust me? I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm a facilitator. I'm asking you to have an experience with your community, the people that you've invited to the circle. If the circle is doing what it's intended to do, you will begin to recreate the connections that you've lost with the people sitting in that room. And as you recreate those connections, one of the consequences might be more trust.
Yes.
Yeah, I can share two things on, first of all, on what was just being said. I would like to share what I would say, why would I participate in a restorative circle and not open up in front of the Auroville Council, for example, on the level of my personal feeling about it. Is mainly because on the case of the Auroville Council, I'm put into a situation where there is a power play. Meaning that I feel that at one time, coming from the other side of the table, a decision can be made. When I would go to a restorative circle, what I would come with is the hope and the wish that we reach that decision together. So that would be the thing that would make me not open in one case and open in the other. And the second thing I wanted to share was on the level of the diversity of cultures. And I feel that we can have that as a real deep hurdle. Really, it could be a really difficult hurdle to go over. But it can also be something very obvious to overcome. And I just want to give you an example of that. During my stay in Australia, one day I was walking down the street with Joe, and we passed next to a house. And there was something really violent happening there. Some Aboriginal guy was being thrown out of the place. Furniture was being thrown out of the place. Clothes were flying. It was really bad. And I made the mistake of crossing his eyes. At that moment, he must have taken me as the fully representing everything that was wrong in his life and everything that was bad for him in his life. So we were walking down the street, and then suddenly, maybe 10, 15 meters later, we realized this guy is running after us with blood in his eyes. It's ready, he's coming for the kill. But then, what happened is that Jo turned around, she walked right to him. She took his hand, and she looked at him in the eyes, and she said, "When you bleed, it's red. And when I bleed, it's red. We have to help each other." And this guy meant it like snow in the sun. He just looked at her and was like, towering her like that. He looked at her and said, "Do you really mean that?" She said, "Yes, I mean that." And arms went down, and we went away, and he went away. So it can be something we can overcome if we come from the place that our culture is not something that we have to be attached to, but it is something actually that is preventing us from meeting other people.
Thank you, Klaus. What I'm hearing is that that story really gets your hope.
Yes.
We can overcome these differences and appreciate one another along with our differences.
Please.
Yeah. I wanted to get back to Rita. Rita, you had something that you wanted to share?
You say Auroville Council is actually doing it as a job, and they are overburdened and overloaded, and it seems this process is really giving it the time to put it in action. Second thing is there is this type of fear because of the that they have to make the decision. I have been put to a conflict that I have still not recovered from this, how to maintain the results, etc.
So is it that it seems that something in the way that this process is a community process, where the community holds the power within itself, gives you, I guess, a sense of hope.
Yes, because you cannot one person, facilitator cannot do anything. It is to the extent that I am willing, and I am willing for, as Laura put it, for a higher harmony. This is what I see.
So is it that as an individual who would come to the circle, you would have more trust because you trust that no one could inflict something on you? You would always have your say.
At least not the kind of legal binding decisions cannot be made between you. It could also be circles because of the culture and all the other things. There still could be misunderstandings, I suppose. But it's okay. It's part of community and that's okay. This is what I want to say. For me, there is a big difference. I personally would not go back myself. I was right to resolve it by myself. I was dragged, and the way the investigation happened, just blew my mind.
So I guess what I heard now was that you want to have choice, and that you felt that you were dragged.
Yes, yeah, I was dragged, and because I wanted a good Auroville, I accepted. Later I understood there are lots of Aurovillians who do not accept to when they are called. So it's okay. It was a bad experience, but I have made sure.
Rakal, you had. Yeah, if I could go to Rakal and then to Aurelia. Thank you. Is that okay?
Yeah. I feel very positive. Speak louder, I feel very positive. I think it's very rich and potentially very productive. This restorative. And I'm saying that because I'm going to put you some observation which I find a little bit weak in the thing. I would like us to be strong so that we can use it. First of all, what I think is very important for Auroville is to present it as a fight for a place where we can fight. Because if we present it as a restorative circle, which is a little bit in contradiction with, I think we can prevent people from. There is a little bit of contradiction between the presentation of Dominique saying that it is a fighting forum and the fact that we call it restorative circle. By the way, we have not expressed any clear aim to this restorative circle. Only you said it's for people the occasion to be heard, something like this.
Just so that I understand, you haven't heard the purpose why somebody would initiate a restorative circle?
No, not initiating, doing.
Why someone would want to attend a restorative circle?
No, it's the purpose of